Hello and welcome back to Microsoft Virtual Academy. This is Module 2 of XAML for Windows 10 controls.
That's right.
And we're going to be building out a great custom control.
Nice to have you back, Darren.
Nice to be back.
All right.
So, custom controls.
Yeah,
I guess we're going to dive straight in over to you, Jerry, on your XAML.
All right. We know what a custom control is, thankfully, because of our previous session. And now we're going to build one. And let's just go for it. So it's a complex control, so it'll get you a long way down the line.
Yeah, let's have a look at your Visual Studio.
All right, so I've got Visual Studio up, and I'm in a blank app. This is it happens to be a Template 10 app, but it is just the blank. It doesn't have anything going on except main page. And just so you see kind of where we're starting from, it's got, this is, in theory, our terms of use, and this lorem ipsum is the complex terms of use that we paid an attorney for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't feel ripped off at all. Anyway, if you look at it, it's just a stack panel with a couple text blocks in it. We're good to go. What we'd like to do is create a button control, we'll call it a composite control that has that will allow them to submit the terms of use, but only after they accept it. And so we can kind of go from there. And so we'll put that right here, but we don't have any such control. So let's create one. And we're going to create all of those. Obviously, now we're going to put it in the root. That'd just be the sloppiest thing ever. We'll put it up in the controls folder, which will be in the controls namespace. Nothing would stop us from putting this into a portable class library as well. We don't need to kind of go to that level, but you certainly could do that. That's what these are sort of meant to do. All right, so here are all the types we can create. There's templated control.
Deja vu.
New item. Yes, exactly. So far, so good. What would you like to call this?
Ooh, what should we call it?
Submit button.
Submit button. Checked submit button.
It's checked submit button. That's good enough for me. Perfect. Now it's going to create the class under the controls folder, which you would expect, but also it'll go ahead and create our generic XAML for us as well. So that's where everything is going to be. Beautiful, beautiful. All right, so let's take a look at the base implementation. That's what we're looking at here. I'll get rid of. We start all projects by getting rid of the documentation.
Exactly.
Just clutters my code.
And never revisit it.
That's right.
Yes.
Danny, how's the font size? All right. With Danny's approval, we'll continue.
Indeed.
Very, very nice. All right. So, so this is saying that the default style key is going to be the check submit button, which we know is defined here in XAML for us.
OK, we need to fix our little issue there with the namespace.
That's right. First thing is to have our namespace declaration up in the resource dictionary so we don't have to mess with any kind of build errors. I'm going to go ahead and build just to make sure everything is nice and nice.
It's always good to start from a firm foundation of compiling code.
OK, at this point it runs.
Yep, it's downhill from here.
OK, let's see what we can do. You know, I don't like, I'm just going to shut off, oops, here we go. I'm going to go to the settings, actually, not the control. I'm just going to disable that regeneration.
Speed things up.
Just so it's quicker.
Yep.
Right, so now when I build, you don't see that little dialog because it's not doing it, because it's already done it. Funny it keeps doing it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Let's consider this.
Paranoid.
It's like, maybe there's a change.
Yeah.
Maybe 1 second ago you did it. All right. All right, let's build out what this might look like. By default, it gives us this little border. I don't care really much about any of this. All I care about is the checkbox and the button that we're going to put in here. So you can't put two things in a control template. You can only put one.
So you've got to put them inside a panel.
I'll put it inside a panel. I will elect the stack panel, but I could put anything there.
OK.
We'll put the checkbox at the top, and we'll give its a default content of I agree, let's just say.
OK.
That's usually what it says, you know, as you.
I think so.
Of all the things you don't read. And then a button, and we'll make its content submit, let's just say. That's nice. Very nice. OK. Let me think. Yeah, that's done. I think we're pretty close to shipping. Let's build this out. Jump over to XAML. I'll open up my toolbox here, and I should be able to see then. There it is. So there's my check submit button, or your check submit button, depending on how you want to claim it. And I'll drag it in. Very nice. I can see it right there.
Yep. It's a problem with this resolution. It's hard to see everything.
That's right. Let me kind of tight. I spend more time rearranging windows. All right. So there it is, built out. You can see it's
perfect.
The way it's highlighting. I have a single object here. That's because the template defines everything inside one. That part is beautiful. If I were to run it now, I'll go ahead and do that. So here's my blah, 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 check and submit. No functionality yet, but that's by default.
But it looks great already.
Yeah, honestly, it is kind of it's nice. Now, sometimes I don't want to have I agree. I want to have I submit. Oh, that's terrible sound.
Yes.
I comply.
Yeah.
So let's start by creating a dependency property that will specifically change just the text of the checkbox. Right?
Sounds good.
So remember, it's prop DP. We get that for free.
So this is one of the snippets that
ships in Visual Studio.
Okay.
Give me a double tap, and I get that for free.
Do you double tap tab there?
I double tab. I said double tap, but I meant double tab. That's exactly right. And we'll call this the CheckText. Right? So for sake of awesome naming. And right here, what class does it belong in? It's going to be right here in our check to submit button. So this is the, and finally, it's way over there, isn't it?
Yep.
And it's
Why don't you break
default.
those lines up so
It's
people
going
can
to
see?
be I agree is the default text. So I'll bring all this around here in just a second.
You want to change the magic string for CheckText there to name of?
Let me just open everything up so we can see the whole thing.
Sounds
Bam!
good.
That is our, finally we got it.
Yep.
All right, yes. And so yeah, so this is, nobody likes this, right? Literal strings. So we can say name of, and we can put in CheckText. So now it'll insert that for me when it actually compiles.
Yep, we like this.
And great, so it's for this one, and this is the default property. Now, because this is a dependency property, it's easy for me to data bind to. Because this is the implementation of the style, it'll already be in the context when I'm in that style. So now I can go back to generic XAML, and here we are. I want to take away this literal string of I agree. In this case, I'll say template binding, because one way is fine for me, right? It's not going to change the text of the checkbox. Template binding will go to, what do we call it, CheckText?
CheckText, I think you did.
And look at that.
It's
Hey,
giving
Visual
you
Studio
IntelliSense.
is my friend on this one. Yeah, exactly. All right, beautiful. So now I should be able to do a couple of things. I should be able to go back to, probably might need to rebuild to get rid of that, but that is what it is. Let me go here. So here's where I've placed it on my page. I'll have a new property now called CheckText, and I can set that to I
really agree.
really agree. Great. That's terrific. All right. I'll go ahead and run it, and a build will fix all of those squirrely underlines. And I really agree. That's pretty cool. So we put it in the declaration of main page, and then that flows into the implementation of our button, which is bound into the template of our button. That's pretty neat.
Okay. So you could probably do the same thing for the button text.
Yeah, let's just repeat that with the button text. I'll just copy and paste so I don't have to do things twice. And up here, I'll change the word check to button. What do you think of that? Capital B. That was great, Jerry. All right, so B-U-T-T-O-N to B-U-T-T-O-N. There's no way we could have left that. All right, so this will be
submit.
Submit will be the default value. Right, very nice. And so obviously the word check didn't need to be replaced right there. So now we have two properties, one for the text of the checkbox, one for the text of the button. Both are basically built the same. I'll go back to the template again, and I'll say, well, here, same as before, template binding, and it's going to be button text. Beautiful. Same thing as before, I'll go back to main page, and I'll change it. It's button binding to, or it's button text, I mean, to click here, let's just say. It's kind of craziness, but should work perfectly as well. And with a rebuild, even the design time would work. Great. Click here, and I really agree.
Yep.
Neat. So there's custom properties.
So now we've created some things that influence the display, but we haven't done anything that implements any behavior.
Yeah, so let's begin by maybe making it, so that button to submit, which we see now is click here in design time, which you would want. You know, you don't want to be able to click that button until you agree.
Unless you agree, yeah.
That's not an uncommon scenario. Now I can do all that in visually, I think, declaratively, I think. I don't need to actually do anything in the code itself. I can do it all with binding. So let's try that out. I'm going to start by giving a name to both the checkbox and the button. Let's see. Oops, X instead of C. So my checkbox, as I think you were suggesting that earlier. And then maybe my button. Ah, beautiful.
Yeah, it's the originality.
All right, good. And so let's make it so that this button is not enabled. And so that's going to be easy enough. I'll just say is enabled equals false. So now the button is not enabled.
Great.
But I want it to be enabled if the checkbox is checked. Of course, the checkbox has a property called isChecked that's already part of a checkbox. So I can say
so you could go
binding to element name.
So the key thing here is you're now using binding because you couldn't use template binding to do the element name resolution.
That's right, because the context of template binding is the control itself, not one of its peers here.
Okay.
And I can't use xbind because it's not supported in a content or in a control template.
Yes.
So So first I'll just set the context here. So I'm right now I'm binding to the entire checkbox. That's not what I want to do.
Seems unwise.
Yeah, yeah. What I really want to do is bind to is checked. And so I did it reversed like that. Sometimes I do that. You do it too, I'm sure, so that you get IntelliSense. Yeah. Otherwise, it doesn't know what you're binding to, so it can't give you IntelliSense. So here we are. And of course, this is the same as path equals, right? Those two are identical. And won't be able to handle that with my OCD, that's for sure.
The space is on the wrong side of the comma.
I can barely think straight with this blue underline here, I can tell you right now. All right, so this should give it, right? So the checkbox is not checked by default.
Yep.
That means that is checked would be false, which means the button would be disabled. When you check it, then the button would be enabled. Wow, that really works out great.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and hit F5. We can see what that looks like.
Let's see if we get punished for going off script.
Nice. So here we are, not checked, so it's disabled. I'll go ahead and check it, and now it is. That's really great. That's really great. We're really getting a lot of functionality fast for free.
That's what XAML does for us.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. All right, what else should we do?
Well, I think we need to actually put something in that happens when we click on the button.
All right, so the button automatically has a checked event or a clicked event. Why don't we give a clicked event then to our control?
We could do that, or we could look at commands.
Oh, that's right. I mean, that's a typical way of using a button, isn't it? To add a button.
And then we could look at the can execute aspect of the command as well if we wanted to go down that route.
Yeah, let's do that. All right, so I'll jump over to the implementation of our button again. Here we go. I already have these two properties. I'm going to just kind of minimize those because they're pretty healthy in size. I'll copy the check to text, and we will just use that as our base. Change check text to command. Now, in this case, the implementation of command is actually pretty sophisticated. We're not going to be doing that. We're just going to be passing it through into the button, which already has the full implementation. What did I type? CHECKTEXT, select. What did I do wrong? Check text. Check text. Oh, I'm putting ED for some words. All right. Check text.
It's harder to say.
So much harder than you think. All right, so I'll set the default is going to be to null, and I'm going to change it. Of course, this isn't going to be a string. This is going to be an I command. That's an interesting interface for XAML.
It is. It is. It's something that ships out of the box, but somewhat interestingly, no implementation of I command ships.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep, you have to roll your own. Fortunately, in template 10, we have.
Yeah, that's right. If you're a fan of other MVVM frameworks like MVVM Lite or Caliburn or something like that, you get it also. But it's also part of Template 10. This is a Template 10 project. We actually have it, so that is pretty nifty. We'll just say I command, so you can pass in any implementation of command. That's the way the button is already wired up to go. And so if I go back to my button definition here, I could say command, template binding again, because all I care about is that property. I'll just say to the command. So now this is nice because the rich functionality of command that we interact with a button, now I can do that.
It's just pass through. You don't have to worry about any of the logic in yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. I'm not going to implement it, I don't think, back in main page. I don't have a ViewModel or anything like that right now. But I could, right? If I went into the control right here, I could still see now there's a new command I can pass something, xnull.
Exactly.
That's probably not the best use. But yeah. All these properties I could pass xnull to.
Indeed.
All right.
Or just leave them empty.
So that's important, actually, because if you start having controls that have some sort of rich capability, you want to bubble that up, too. You want to make it exposed through your control so you're not recreating. I could implement a full command interface as well.
Yes.
Calling can execute, determining whether or not I should set everything to disabled or not, but that's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
And that might be important because maybe can execute is, since it's outside of the control, is determining whether or not the user has scrolled all the way to the bottom. You know, before that, it's
so there may be other rules and so on that you're dependent upon but aren't implemented.
Yeah, that's
so you have to have that external control.
Yeah, so this just gives the developer more flexibility to be able to create anything they want and be able to keep the kind of the functionality they're already accustomed to. All right, this is a pretty easy control so far.
Yep.
Let's see. Now let's go to events. So I think that is worth bubbling up as well. When I click that event, I might want some, or when I click the button I might want something to occur. Or even still, when I check that box, I might want something to occur.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe somewhere else in my UI, something else is going to change whenever I click I really agree, but don't click the button yet. Right? So both of those are kind of important. Both of those are events that are natively part of the controls that we're using.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go in and remind ourselves that my checkbox and my button are what we called these controls. And if we remember kind of what we did before, or what we talked about in the previous module, we can call those templates, we could call those parts of the template in the onTemplate apply.
On-apply template.
On-apply template, that's
Yes.
right. In fact, let's just do it.
Yeah, why not? Rude not to.
All right. Be rude not to. Yeah, that's exactly right. So first, let's create just a reference that we'll be putting those into. The first will be a checkbox. And we'll call it my checkbox. And that equals null for now.
Yep.
Right, because we don't have a reference to it. It's not a field or anything like that yet. We have to go get it. And then the button itself, it will be my button.
So this is very similar to what happens automatically for us when we're creating, say, a XAML page or whatever, and we give an X name to a control. The initialized component part in the constructor of your code behind is basically running the same code.
That's right. As soon as the code is tightly coupled to the XAML, it can do this for you. Because we've decoupled them. It can't do this for you, so we're doing it manually.
Yeah.
Easy enough. All right, so I'll type an override here. And this is going to be onApply template. That's the one we want. That's what gets called as soon as the template is available. And in there, we have an additional method that's given to us called getTemplateChild, into which we would pass the name. So remember, it's my button, for example.
Highly complex.
Yes, as button. It was going to return that as a dependency object. So that's not enough for us, right?
Yeah.
We're going to want the click event of a button specifically.
That's just one better than an object.
Right. Like literally it is.
It is. Yes.
All right, so there's some things you're going to want to do. So because I'm the author of this control, I want to make sure that my button is actually there because it's important for me. So I would include then a little bit of logic here that says if my button equals null, null, that is, I would throw a new null reference exception. Throw a new null reference exception. I must not have REFER. I must not have some using. System. I don't have system. Golly.
It's because you cleaned up your control too much at the beginning. That's the problem. If you clean all your references when you've got an empty class, then you're not using anything.
Yes, that's right. Like, where's null of all the exceptions I know exist because I've hit it so many times. All right, then we'll just repeat this then for the checkbox. So as nice as that is, I think it actually makes more sense for us to have a utility method that does the casting and the testing, because it might end up that we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 controls, and all of a sudden we're repeating this kind of needless code. So a nice little generic method will do this for us. That'll return whatever.
Yep.
We'll call it T. And in fact, let's just copy this and call it, so we can still call it getTemplateChild with a generic of T. And in this case, we still want the same thing. We want string name, and that's all. So we're going to do the same operation as getTemplateChild. We're just going to make this a of type T. Right? So here we go. So let's take this logic right here and just kind of duplicate it for now. And I'll say var child equals getTemplateChild. I'm not going to pass in a question mark. I'm going to be passing in a T. No, I'm going to pass in the name.
Yep.
And I'm going to cast it as T. Of course, this will not work. The reason it won't work is because T could be anything at this point.
Exactly. So we're going to put some constraints on this.
Let's see. It's a dependency object.
Yep.
So if I say where T is dependency object, now it knows it can cast it properly like that using an as. Now I'll check again, and I'll say if child is null, because I can reuse this logic now, then I'm going to throw a null reference exception, and I have the option to pass in a string here, so I'll pass in the name. So when I get that error, I know which property is null.
Yeah, and probably finally, we want to return it back.
Yeah, we also want to return that child, don't we? Perfect.
Often helps when one wants to compile.
So now I can kind of simplify this by saying button, right, and letting it do all the casting and the testing. Oops, there we go. And so that's all the same logic, and I can then go into here. I can say...
It's like you've done this before.
I've typed C# in the past.
Yeah.
Checkbox, and then its name is going to be, is it capital B?
It's neither. It's my checkbox.
B for box. Silly. All right. So I reordered it because I wanted to be in the same.
Because you are type A.
Can't handle it. Cannot handle that. All right, very good. All right, so this is nice. I might even, I can see this as I'm inheriting control here. If I have a whole bunch of controls I'm creating, I might put that in a reused base as well.
Yep.
Might even make a.
Might even include it in some sort of library, like a template 10 library or something like that.
I could see an extension method that you could do that. What would you do it off of? A string passing in a type?
Yeah, you could do that.
You'd see it everywhere.
But you see it everywhere. That would be really annoying.
Yeah. It's too bad you can't contain or constrain an extension method to a certain class type. That'd be really, really neat. I mean, I know you can to what it's off of, but I mean inside a certain class type.
Yeah. Or some sort of scope. Oh, yes, you could, just by declaring it.
Well, don't use the using everywhere else.
Exactly, yeah.
Don't put your class in the system. Of course,
Exactly.
I didn't have that problem earlier. All right, so that's a nice little utility method that'll get you along the way really fast, right? And so then you can do all kinds of tests. You may have other tests you want to do as well, not only to make sure that it's there, but to make sure that maybe it has a certain value that's necessary for your button to work correctly. All right, so that's where you go get them. On apply template is the first time you can go in and start looking for all of the controls that are inside the template, and then you get them by name. And there's really nothing we can do about this my checkbox being a literal string. That's just the way it is. There's no reference to the template, so there's no way to get it. I could move that up into a constant, but somewhere is going to be a literal string.
Somewhere there's going to be a literal string, but fortunately, if it's just in one place, at least if you do a typo, you fix it once and it's fixed everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly.
So yeah, there's only so much we can do to get away from our human foibles.
Yeah, I suppose I could force them to call the control in the template the same as the field, and then use name of the field. If I just hated literal strings.
Exactly.
I do hate literal strings in its own right. Okay, so this is good for us in a couple of ways. Now we have a reference to both the checkbox and the button. Now we can do things to or listen to events off of those controls. So I'm going to go ahead and listen to the checked event of the checkbox and the clicked event of the button. In order to make those useful for my control, however, I need to set a place for those to bubble up to. So there's an event on the control itself. So I'll create a public event and with an event handler. And in this case, I know that both of those are going to be routed events. So I don't want to use event args. I want to use routed event args, like so. And we'll just call this clicked. And I'll just duplicate that for checked. I better put it above it. It's alphabetized now.
You feel so much better.
Well, I didn't want to get it wrong. All right, so now I have the references here, and I'll just set up their handler to pass right through it. So I'll say my check dot check. Checks. There's the event, and in its handler, I can just have a simple anonymous handler because I'm not doing anything special. I can raise then our checked, C-H-E-C-K-E-D, and I'll use question mark point.
Another nice entry in C#6, a little bit of syntactic sugar, that does a null check for us, and will only execute the invoke method should checked not be null. And because this is an event, checked would be null if we didn't have any subscribers to that event.
Yeah, just because we have this capability doesn't mean a developer is going to use it, and so checked could be null. So now we'll just repeat that. That is really it simplifies a lot of things. I'll do the same thing then for clicked. That's when the button is clicked. Obviously not that, though. When the button is clicked, then I can call our clicked event and invoke that as well, passing in all the args. You may not even use those args in all reality. I could have done it as a regular event with regular event args. But you might want them for the pointer or something like that, and then now you've got it. Because maybe you want to fly out or something like that.
Yeah.
I could see that, actually.
So now we've actually started implementing behavior as well as look and feel.
Yeah, that's right. And pretty simply, too, right? I mean, it hasn't done too much, really. We've got a handful of methods or properties down here, these two new events, and this capability of making sure that it's disabled even until the user accepts the terms. And the ability to flow through the simple updates of text, right? This would allow for at least basic localization right away.
Sure.
And and the ability to flow through if the complex stuff like iCommand to make sure a button is still a button, and you don't ask a user to do something that's not natural for them to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Like
you
eat
should,
pizza.
yeah, you should probably hook up something to respond to those events.
Let's do that. All right. So if I were to go back into main page, in fact, let me do a quick build so I can make sure I have everything available to me. Clickety click. All right. So here inside the event, I'll say if once the button is checked, clicked, not the button is checked. When the button is clicked, then it'll be I'll call it submit clicked. I'll jump to its implementation and code behind here. By hitting F12, it is possible that that is magical to somebody. And there I'll do something. And so in this case, I know exactly what I'll do. We're going to put a dialog up. Because what else do people want? Yeah, exactly.
You certainly don't want to journey into the crunchy goodness that is the app that's implemented behind the terms of use.
Well, I don't have anything. This is the entire app.
Yeah.
I suppose you could call out to an app using protocol activation.
Yeah, you could then launch something else.
And it passes back something that says they accepted, so you only have one in a family of apps.
Yeah, you could. So you could charge $10 for this thing, which could be an MS News launcher.
Your app is actually free, but it doesn't run until you accept terms, which cost $10.
Exactly.
I like that. Yeah. Wow, we just became millionaires overnight.
I know.
Oh my gosh. All right, so let me just
Coming to a store near you.
message dialog with a lowercase I. Add the using for that. It's going to be thank you. Thank you, very courteous. Thank you, mate. Right? That's so you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And
now we're speaking English.
show async and show async and let's see. And we're done. And wait a minute. What? Of all the things to get wrong, stupid message box. What did I do wrong? You pass in a string, and there's an awaiter. There's async. Is it what? Wait, what?
Get a way to show async.
Message dialog. I pass in the stupid string.
Oh, I bet you've cleared out the namespace that brings in the syntax for show async on a task. You know, you've got the two different types of asynchronous.
Oh my goodness, there's no system anymore. Yes, yeah. Oh yeah, I know what you mean.
There you go.
That using system is really important. Come on, it was Rosalind was supposed to take care of me there. What's the problem? All right, so it turns out that showing message dialog is still the same. Woo!
They didn't suddenly ship a new framework.
Change it again! You killed me, man. All right, very good. All right, let's see what this looks like. I'll go ahead and run it.
And breathe a huge sigh of relief.
Oh my goodness! Thank goodness I know how to show a dialogue. All right, so I'm gonna let's see. Lorem ipsum dolor sit emit. It seems good. I'm gonna go ahead and agree to that. And then when I click this, now I get. Thank you, mate. Very nice. I like how the new dialogues can go outside like that.
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, it's nice. I don't like how the fact they have no border whatsoever.
I know it. Gosh, that's not the only place I see it too. Yeah. I had no idea.
It's unfortunate.
All right, those aren't decisions we make. Those are not decisions we make, right? Nope. We're building on the platform we've got. All right.
Embrace it, Jerry. Embrace it.
I kind of like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's clean.
All right.
White on white is hard to see.
Let's look back at what we've done. In fact, I think what might make this interesting for us to see might just be able to look at this in a diagram so we can get a feel for the control that we kind of just built. All right. This has a neat little auto size thing. I think that's so cool. Click. It's neat. All right. You ever use this view?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's nice, especially when there's a lot of, especially when it's somebody else's project. Like, I can't look at your code.
It's great if you actually code for other people and you deliver stuff that you can create a lot of your documentation.
You can right-click this and say, where's the get image? There's a get image. There it is. Copy image.
Yep.
It's beautiful. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it looks so professional.
Drop it into Word. Looks like you spent hours on it.
Yeah. And it alphabetizes the properties, so if some bozo has built it and it's not alphabetized, you don't have to worry about it.
It just makes you happy, Jerry, doesn't it?
It goes crazy. I mean, it's worth saying checked and clicked is in the right order. All right, let's look. Forget the fields because they don't matter, but let's look at the properties. So we have these three properties that we created, but the command, the text for the check, and the button text. Now, in all reality, that's probably not enough for a control you're going to create. You're going to want to pass in a few other things like left to right, right to left, so they can control different things for localization. You might even want to change the way that focus works. You may want the entire thing to be focused. You may not. In this case, you probably wouldn't. You might want to also add automation properties as well to make sure that you're bubbling the automation property of the checkbox up through a property inside your control to make sure that screen readers can still read that checkbox now that's been kind of nested and hidden inside your control.
And this really comes back to that decision around whether you're going to ship a control that's going to be used across a broad range of applications and environments and so on and so forth. You know, to a certain extent, Microsoft has tools and controls that ship that support all of these different scenarios, which is to a certain extent why there aren't as many controls as perhaps you might expect to see shipping out of the box. Because frankly, it's pretty difficult to cover all of these different usage scenarios, to go through all the different testing and so on and so forth. So think about that when you make your controls available. Think about the target. And if there are limitations, be very explicit about it, because it's unfortunate if people invest a lot of time leveraging your toolkit only to find that there are limitations that are no longer suitable for their scenarios.
Yeah. So let's do one last thing, which will be pretty cool. We are using this control. Now, no developer would do this in all reality, but I think I want to show...
But you're no developer, so
right.
That's fine.
Right, exactly. So no conflict there. Right, exactly. So now I can go to the designer. Of course, it's nice we have design time support. And including that binding logic is there. I can go into the designer, right-click, and say Edit Template. Now, in this case, if I said Edit Current, that would actually be our generic, but that's not the way this works, right? Edit Current would only edit a custom template that you're creating for one. And so if I said Edit a Copy, it's going to say, okay, well, this is what we're going to call it, and this is where we're going to put it. I'll say put it in the page.resources. That's going to be above us. Call it this, and I'll say Go. And it does the amazing feat, and truly, this is the amazing feat, of pulling it out of generic XAML and giving me an exact copy of it. You can see there's my button, or there's my checkbox, there's my button with all the names and everything we just typed. Now, what's great about this is I have determined that this always has to be foreground of red, let's say. And you can see over here in the designer, it works perfectly because this is my new. But this sort of introduces the problem again of when we're retemplating. Because now the developer goes in generic, and they're like, you know what? Checkbox, absolutely positively, because of the law, has to be below the button or whatever, you know. And from this point forward, we're compliant with the new regulations in our industry, and we're ready to go. But unfortunately, the developer has gone in and retemplated it. So now, if you run it, you would think it would be button checkbox, but of course, you're going to go to the closest scope, and it's still checkbox button, right? Because we've retemplated it as well. So that's a little caveat and a warning, but it's a cool thing too to be able to go in and say, I wonder how it's all put together. It's all put together because I can copy it.
Yeah, and to the point you made earlier on, this is a great way to learn how to build advanced controls, is to look at the existing templates, look at the existing styles, go into generic.xaml and so on and so forth. Yeah.
So there it is. Obviously, if I had put this inside a PCL or a portable class library, or just a class library, right? One that's not a non-portable class library.
A non-PCL PCL?
Then a non-PCL. Yeah. Well, anyway, stop it. There's no jokes with the word letter P.
I'm a doctor, not a physicist.
Nice. That's exactly right. What are we talking about?
I think we're going to recap.
Ah, that's what it's going to be. Right.
Yeah, that's
right.
Let's back to my slides.
Let's go back to your slides. That's exactly right.
So
we started by just customizing it, right? So this is basically what we created as far as the template for our control, intentionally separated from its implementation so that developers can go in and retemplate if they need to.
Yeah.
We showed how that's easy to do, but we also talked about the caveats around it as well. So in this case, the checkbox and the button, both are there, and it's at the developer's leisure to add as many as they want and then expose up the different properties that they need to. And so we also remember when we were getting the part, which we called by name, and the part was that get template child, and we overrode that, and not overrode, we overloaded that and gave us another one that was a generic, so that we could pass in the string like we would expect, but get back the type we want and do all the testing, so that we don't have to repeat that logic over and over again. In this syntax, you can see we've got it actually, the name is actually in a constant, but again, you can't get away from the fact somewhere they're going to have a literal string, more than likely. Then we were talking about adding behavior to it. So in this case, the custom behavior was actually accomplished in binding, changing the enabled for the button to toggle on and off based on the enabled or the checked of the checkbox. So that was nice.
Yep.
And interesting because you could actually disable certain functionality without even having to subclass the control that way. I actually like doing as much as I can declaratively, to be honest, because of the design time support.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
very
And of course, you could add functionality also in the implementation as well. I could have actually done all of this in the implementation, not worried with any data binding. And that's a decision you get to make, partly because you may not want developers to override its behavior. So think about that twice when you're doing it. Maybe you don't get the design time support, but maybe you do get the encapsulation that makes sure that the control works the way that you think it's going to work. That part's nice. And then we added some custom properties, right? And we made sure that the content of the checkbox, the checked status of the checkbox, the content of the button, all of those are exposed up as proper properties of our own control, so that they can be accessed, not just so they can be accessed declaratively in XAML, but also so if any of these need to participate in localization, they can also participate in localization, I would imagine. I would add several more properties before I'm done. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But it's nice to just kind of show the basics. Then we talked about extending the capabilities so that we have different events. In this case, we're just bubbling up the clicked event that's inside our control, and we're just bubbling up those routed events as well using our own checked. But we could have done it even more. You know, we could have created one that says, you know, it's a terms are accepted event, true or false. We could have even had a Boolean of terms are accepted property, so that you could bind to that as well, and something happens when that occurs as well.
Yep.
So it could have been an event, or it could have been anything. Of course, it's C#, so we can do anything we want.
We can do anything we want, and that's really all the power.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Making it all custom here and kind of brought apart. So now we have our class library, or our class diagram, that kind of shows the different pieces that we had that are custom. And yeah, it's nice. Here, there's a great list.
Yep.
It's nice and reusable, right? I could have dragged this on about 16 times if I needed
in fact,
to.
you probably have.
I probably have, just to prove it works. That's kind of what we did when we were high Darren on the other. We encapsulate all this logic. It's all template ready, right? So that means that any developer can come in and make this look the way they need to if they have to. And so you get to control kind of how much of the capability they get to retemplate as well. It's all data bindable because we used dependency properties instead of regular properties. It's all programmable, whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
Because we've made it all extensible so that I could reference it from the code behind of the main page.
Yep.
And I honestly believe, I mean, we picked a sample that was as simple as we could come up with, but
For obvious reasons.
for obvious reasons,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I believe this is a pretty simple approach for you to be able to extend the functionality of your application. If you're on a team and you have multiple projects, or you're just on a team and you have different types of developers that do different things, creating an encapsulated control can be one of the smartest things you ever do.
Exactly, because the great thing about that is it prevents other people worrying about how to do a bunch of things. You can just encapsulate it, you can share it. And I think you did a very good job in terms of introducing all the various elements of what will go into a control.
Thank you.
Distilled it down so that it showed there's nothing to be afraid of putting those controls in there. There's nothing to be afraid of finding those parts and so on. Sometimes looking at the documentation, it can seem very, very imposing to actually attempt these controls. But I think this particular scenario, I think it was very good.
So this is the second of 3 modules in this course. The first one really went into the details of explaining all of the stuff we did before we did it. This is just walking through the steps of if you were really going to build your own, what would it feel like, and what if it wasn't just a silly hello world? This is more than hello world. Hopefully it's the sort of thing that you might actually create for your application. Hopefully it kind of breaks the barrier and doesn't make it seem quite as imposing as it was before. This is a custom control made with separated templates right there in XAML. You can ship it as a product, or you can ship it in your project, or you can just reuse it because it's in one of your namespaces. It's all up to you. Sometimes this is the right thing to do. Sometimes a user control is the right thing to do. Either way, they're straightforward to you as a developer and easy to use. We'll have a third module coming up.
We were talking about styling and resources.
Where we'll take this control or something like it, and we'll talk about how to use all the resources to make it awesome.
Sounds good.
We'll see you then.
See you then.